Hello.
Hello.
Yes.
I'm Julia from Radio Romania.
Yes.
Could I talk to Mr. Ian Anderson?
Yes, it's me talking.
Hello. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for taking the time
No problem.
to speaking with us. It's been 20 years since your first show in Romania, and this is your fourth show, I think.
Wow, you've been counting.
Did you notice any changes here in our country?
Yes, and I'm sure I will notice some more changes in your country. It's the reality of the world we live in. If I go to New York, not very much changes. It gets a little taller. But otherwise, it's pretty much the same as it was when I first went there in 1969. If I walk through the middle of London, it kind of stays the same. Maybe a lot of faces on the streets that weren't there 40 years ago. People from different countries, different nationalities, increases in tourism, but it looks pretty much the same. But if I go to Prague, or if I go to Budapest, or if I go to Moscow, I mean, I see a lot of changes. And of course, in the years since the collapse of the Soviet Union, then of course things have changed a great deal for many countries, particularly in Eastern Europe. So we'd expect to see those changes, and in some ways they are reflected by the freedoms of expression, of music, of entertainment, I mean, 30 years ago you wouldn't have had The Walking Dead released in Romania. In fact, The Walking Dead probably would have played in the USA and nowhere else, but it was sold immediately to 150 countries around the world. That's the reach of American television drama and movies and music, and America and Britain are both very good at exporting their culture around the world, and we can invade small countries quite easily with our arts and entertainment, but we're not very good at doing it when we send men with big boots and guns.
You released a new album, Homoeroticus, and it peaked 14 in UK album charts. Was this a surprise to you?
I have no interest then or now in album charts or any charts at all. They're reflective, really, of sales in a very small window, so it's not really an important issue. And if you'd asked me what was in the charts 40 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to answer the question. I can't answer the question today. I have no idea. I don't really listen to music, and I don't really follow pop and rock music, so it doesn't... it's not for me a measure of anything at all. I just don't think about that.
During this tour, you will play the entire album on stage? Or?
In certain countries, yes, but it depends if the promoter wants to pay the extra money for the full show and the production and the video and additional people, or whether the promoter wants to do a basic rock show, in which case we play essentially the best of Jethro Tull, and that's what we're doing theoretically in Romania next week. And I believe that people are they see one thing and they write it, they print it, but I've seen it wrongly described as being the Homoeroticus tour in Romania, and that we're playing all of the album with video and everything else. That's not the case. It's never been the case. That's not the show the promoters bought. They bought the basic Best of Jethro Tull show and turned down the opportunity to do the show with video and so on. Not that we can really do that in an outdoor show, but we could have done it in Bucharest. But as in Spain and a few other countries, they've decided they just wanted the Best of Jethro Tull show without all the video, without all the theatrical stuff. So that's what they get. But in the UK, we've just done 20 shows, and in other parts of Europe later in the year, and 2 tours in the USA, and in Australia and New Zealand, we'll be playing the full video show, with all the theatrical elements, because that's what those promoters bought. You know, we're on the supermarket shelves. You can buy me with the extra trimmings, or you can buy the basic essential range.
I understand. How do you decide when composing which piece will make a Jethro Tull album and which an Ian Anderson album?
Well, I have for many years increasingly performed using my own name, often in addition to Jethro Tull, because Jethro Tull is the repertoire. It's the 28 different people who've been part of the band over a period of 44 years or whatever it is. So that's then. And now, in my final years as a performing musician, I would prefer people know my real name as I disappear across the sea into the sunset.
Do you have a favorite place at home where you like to write music?
Yes. I tend to. I have to have real solitude and quietness, so I go and sit in a room where I can have comfortable temperature, and it sounds a little lively acoustically, but it makes the flute sound nicer. And so I sit there quietly with my laptop computer and my flute and my guitar, and I sit down and start work, and that's where I like to be. But I think it's like, you know, choosing in a room where do you put the bed? You know, you have an instinct, don't you? This feels right to have the bed against that wall, facing that window, and you don't really know why. It just feels right. And that's the same thing with finding a space to play or write music in. It just feels right.
Tell me, what was it like growing up in Blackpool, England?
I imagine it would have been not too different to growing up anywhere else, because growing up is more about growing up than where you do it. But I think Blackpool being by the sea maybe plays a part in having a sense of space in front of you, and that is encouraging. It's not claustrophobic. If I'd grown up in the middle of London or Manchester, then maybe I wouldn't have enjoyed that. It was kind of nice to be able to go and stand and look out into the far horizon across a big empty grey sea, and give you a sense of space and optimism. But as a town, it's not a very nice town. It wasn't so bad in the past, but I've been back to Blackpool many times, and not a town that I would ever want to live in again. It's not a pretty town. It's by the sea, but that's about it. As I say, the sea is always grey. It's not a pretty place.
What was the first instrument you learned to play?
It was a plastic ukulele. It had a picture of Elvis Presley on the front, and it cost 22 and sixpence, which is about, £1, I suppose. And it was, just a piece of rubbish, really. I mean, it was just a toy. I was very disappointed because I saved up my pocket money to buy this thing, and it was very disappointing. But I played a few chords on it, and the next year my father bought me a beat-up old guitar. Maybe I bought it, I can't remember, but it was only £5, and it was terrible, but at least it was a start. And so I was probably 11 by then, but I didn't really learn to play the guitar till I was about 15. Then I could play a few chords and play some music with a couple of friends from school.
And the flute? When
I was 20 years old in the summer of 1967 when I exchanged my guitar for a flute, and that was sorry, I can't do anything about this phone. I exchanged it for a flute, and it was a very basic model flute that was not easy to play. But towards the end of 67, I think around December, I managed to get a note or two out of the flute and started to try to play a few lines, and by February of 68, I was playing it in Jethro Tull, as we became known in February of 1968. So that was when I really got to play it properly, I suppose, was about around, end of January, beginning of February of 1968, when I could take it on stage with me and try to play it in a few songs.
And your tendency to stand on one leg while playing the flute comes from where?
Comes from playing the harmonica standing on one leg. And I don't know why, just something I did. Again, it's just something that feels right. It's a kind of balance. It's a poise. It's a bit... Some people do that when they do yoga. Some people do it when they learn classical ballet. But it's also a pose, as I discovered many years later, that is found in folklore and tradition in several countries of the world. There are Indian gods in both North and South America depicted playing the flute, standing on one leg. There is the Hindu god Krishna in India. In folklore, he's always depicted standing on one leg. In Hameln, in northern Germany, there is the Pied Piper, depicted visually as dancing through the streets on one leg. So it's something that seems to exist in history and culture throughout the world, going back many thousands of years. But that's just coincidence. And I only found these things out when I came to look online in the early 90s. Actually, probably the late 90s by the time I was really online and able to use a search engine. But I only found out about these things in relatively recent years.
I noticed the high energy you have on stage. Do you practice any sports to be in good shape always?
Yes, I'm very keen on practicing imaginary sports. I sit and watch Formula One Grand Prix racing and pretend that I'm behind the wheel of a car. I won't be watching the football because I don't like men falling over for no reason and spitting too much. So I don't really like football. And I can safely say that since Romania, I don't believe, is in the World Cup final. No. So safe to say that. I'm kind of an imaginary, guy. I don't. My exercise is doing 2 hours of aerobics most days, but that's because I'm standing on a stage getting paid for it. So I don't have to go to the gym like other people. I just do what I do, and as long as I'm performing on a regular basis, then I can keep fit. But no, I don't do any physical preparation. I prepare mentally because I have to always be sure, even after 3 or 4 days of not doing a concert, I really have to spend some time to go through lots of little cues, lots of little moments, and because the set list, often changes, it's not playing the same songs every day, so I have to do quite a bit of preparation, but I don't spend my time working out in the gym or playing tennis or running or doing any of those things, because what I do on stage is pretty active and involves, as I say, a lot of aerobics. So that's what I do. I do what I do. I'm a jet fighter pilot. I don't fly a Cessna in my spare time.
Is it true you refused to play Woodstock?
Yes. I didn't refuse. I just said I would prefer not to do this, thank you. I didn't want to be associated with the hippie, and this was the end of the hippie era, so it was all about drugs and getting naked, and it, the bands that were on were all those kind of hippie bands, and I don't really like festivals anyway, so it was easy for me to say no. And it was a very, very good career move not to play Woodstock, because if Jethro Tull had played Woodstock, we would have been, in everybody's mind, the hippie band. And we would have had too much success too soon. Because we would have been pretty good at Woodstock, and people would have gone, wow, look at this new band, Jethro Tull. And we weren't ready for that. We'd need another 2 or 3 years to gently get noticed by people, particularly in America. So we needed more time, and that was good not to move too fast. Good to, we became, I suppose, really successful in America by the time of our fourth album, and actually fifth album, Thick as a Brick. So 5 years had gone by since we began.
Yeah, but what made you say yes to the Isle of Wight?
Well, it was in Britain, so it wasn't such a big issue to get there, and it was also a festival, I think, that had a number of bands on it that I felt more comfortable being associated with. But in some ways, well, it was kind of okay, but it wasn't the huge. It was a very large event in terms of numbers of audience, but it wasn't perhaps culturally such a huge thing as Woodstock. And also because I suppose the Isle of Wight festival ended in a lot of bad feelings and a lot of economic disaster. I mean, the organizers lost money, artists didn't get paid, we didn't get paid. And it was very ugly with lots of rioting and terribly bad behavior. It was an interesting festival to be at culturally, but it wasn't a success. And even artistically, I don't think it was a great success. A lot of the artists were upset, and it was very amateurishly presented. So it wasn't. It was interesting, but not good.
I understand.
A bit like a bad curry. It's interesting, but not good.
Is it true that you recorded Aqualung in a studio that was a converted church?
Yes.
And how was it?
It was horrible. It was a new studio built by Island Records in London, and it was a church they'd converted into studios and offices, and it was basically a big studio in the big part of the church, the nave, which sounded terrible, and the equipment was new and untested and wasn't working properly. And downstairs there was a basement which had a small studio, which was much better, sounded much better. But unfortunately, Led Zeppelin were booked in there all the time, and so we had to record in the big church hall, which was horrible. So it was a very difficult album to make. Not a good atmosphere in the place, and it was also technically a difficult album to make. So the fact that we got it finished and it became, the most successful Jethro Tull record in terms of units of sale is a bit of a triumph against all the odds.
You kind of inspired the MTV Unplugged series. Because I know that you're one of the very first bands who went to MTV in New York and performed live. Do you remember that?
Yes, they weren't expecting it. We just took some instruments with us and played, and they thought that was really exciting. But people did that in radio stations back then. It was just the first time I think it had been done on television, and afterwards they said, "Wow, this is a great idea. We should have more people, come along and bring their instruments." And I think it was really probably when Eric Clapton did MTV Unplugged, which was the big element of publicity that MTV got in terms of capitalizing on that live performance. But by then, of course, it wasn't an impromptu performance. It was all very, very organized and very carefully presented and sound checked. When we went in, we just took in a couple of instruments and tiny little amplifiers. We did it when we did radio shows, and we just went in and just did what we did. They weren't expecting it. There was no sound check. We just played. So it was much more of a genuinely live performance than MTV Unplugged became later on.
You've worked also with orchestras, and I would like to ask you, how different is the project Orchestral Jethro Tull in comparison to a classic case that you recorded with London Symphony orchestra?
I didn't record it. It was recorded by one of the ex-Jethro Tull band members, David Palmer, and he got a deal with a German record company to record an orchestral album of Jethro Tull music, and then after he'd recorded it, he asked me would I add a little flute and strum some acoustic guitar somewhere. So I said yes, and I performed after the fact, just adding it. I wasn't there when the orchestra recorded it. And my honest opinion of the album is it's really boring. I mean, I just think the orchestra did nothing with it. They just played the charts, and it was kind of boring. It didn't do anything really interesting. And I think orchestra and rock music don't work very well together, because as soon as you start to add drums and electric guitars, it becomes it's overkill. Too many things fighting in the same frequencies for attention. So you've got to be very careful when you do that kind of a show. And I've done lots of live performances. In fact, recorded a live album with orchestras in more recent years. But I think the arrangements that I use are much more interesting, and the use of the orchestra and the instruments of a rock band are much more carefully arrived at. So I think what I do these days with orchestras is okay. I mean, I enjoy doing orchestral concerts and playing with string quartets, but you have to take a very different view on the arrangements. I may not have to change my parts very much because I'm an acoustic musician, but if you play conventional rock drums in the same space as an orchestra, it's a recipe for cacophony. It will just turn into a sonic mess. So you've got to be really, really careful, and you have to play very, very quietly.
Sir, do you have any regrets for not attending the Grammys in '89 in order to receive yourself the award for Crest of Knave?
Well, the award was actually for in a category which was a new category that year called Best Hard Rock /Metal album, and Crest of a Knave really wasn't that. I think we were nominated in the category because people accepted that we were a band who'd been around for a long time and never won a Grammy before, and when we finally won the Grammy, I think it was just the 5,000 members of the National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences voted for us because we were a bunch of nice guys who'd never got a Grammy. It wasn't because of the category or that particular album. And we were told by a record company, there was no point in us coming all the way to Los Angeles because Metallica were going to win, and everybody believed Metallica were, really the hot favorite to win. So they didn't want to pay for us to go. It's expensive to fly all the way to Los Angeles and stay in a hotel for 3 nights. And so we stayed in the studio working on another album, and it was a very unpopular win. There were a lot of boos and shouts and upset people, especially the fans of Metallica. So I think if I'd gone there and walked onto the stage and people had booed or shouted, it might have been kind of fun, but I probably would have got fairly angry. And it's probably best that I didn't go. I could have lost my temper.
But you have the award at home? You received it?
I believe so, yes. I think my son found it a couple of years ago when he was clearing out some part of the attic. He found it. I don't know where it is again now. I mean, it's not very pretty. It's nice to win things. I'm very honored to receive any award, especially when it's voted for by my peers, professionals in the music industry. Then, of course, I'm very honored to receive that. But it doesn't mean I want to put it on exhibit where I can see it every day. It's a bit like gold albums, I think I gave most of them away, to charity auctions, or I gave some to my mother and then she gave them away to other people. So I don't really have any of those either. But I don't need to be reminded of who I am and what I do, because when I wake up in the morning, I don't want to walk downstairs and look at gold albums hanging on the wall and Grammys and other various awards that I've been given. I just want to see the coffee machine. And when I've seen the coffee machine, I want to be reunited with my flute and my Apple Mac computer and get on with my day. I don't need to have these objets of excellence, awards, to make me feel good about myself. I can manage without those.
As a band leader, do you think a band can can work as a democracy?
Well, I'm sure some can, but that's not the way that it ever works really in practice. There's usually a person or two people who tend to be the more dominant characters, who will, and very often the more creative characters. So I don't think a true democracy really exists. I know there are bands like Yes, who supposedly split the money 5 ways and all had equal shares in songwriting and performing. That's kind of unusual, but if it's true, then I guess it worked for them for quite a few years. But I think it's relatively unusual. I mean, there's usually someone who is the dominant force, and those who are not the dominant force, usually later on, they get a little upset because perhaps they've not made as much money out of it as the guys who really wrote the songs or were the main characters. So I think it's better to have a clear-cut division, and having a band leader, there's no question that that's the creative and dominant force, and that's something that for me is kind of easier. I mean, I'd rather be the leader of the band or just the bass player. I wouldn't want to be halfway in between fighting for some equal status with other people. I would either accept that my job was there to do what other people or somebody else told me to do and do it as well as I could, or I'd want to be the boss man telling other people what to do. And I guess because I'm a Leo and I'm a tough guy, then it's natural for me to be the boss. But you've got to be a team leader, and you have to be someone who can create a sense of equality in many areas of your working and professional life together. And so I think it's kind of important that you don't seem to be special. I mean, if I travel with the band, then I'm traveling in the economy section of the airplane. When I fly to Romania, for example, when I get out to the other end, I will get into a van with the band and crew, and we kind of stay in the same hotel, and my room's just the same as theirs, and we have a sense of equality. There's no special treatment, but they don't get paid as much as me, and I'm the guy who obviously is since 1974 anyway, I'm kind of the manager of the band, and I finance all of the tours, all of the recordings. So I'm the one who takes the financial risk and takes the creative and economic responsibility for the band.
In Romania, who will be with you on stage?
Whoever turns up at the airport on Thursday. That'll be my next interview coming in, so I'm afraid I have to stop. But yeah, same guys playing with me for the last 12 years, and they've all played as members of Jethro Tull when we've just been doing things as Jethro Tull. So it's a kind of a mixture. Anyway, but nice to talk to you.
Thank you very much.
Anyway, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.